Hello, dear friends. My name is Vasyl Pekhno. I'm a Ukrainian journalist, and I invite all of you to watch this latest update on Ukrainian battle map situation as of August the 7th. So join and watch this video. I'll be starting with Pokrovsk region, really the most crucial region with the Russian attacks, Russian offensive actions. So subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave your comments below this video, and don't forget to like. So push like buttons, as I say always. Let's begin. Please do all these actions about which I ask you. And as usual, let's start.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
So what's happening near Pokrovsk? The occupiers have started dropping leaflets like these. Right now, they're addressing the civilian residents of Pokrovsk, calling for help using drones. First of all, they're doing this, of course. And secondly, they're urging local residents to reveal the positions of Ukrainian troops and to welcome the so-called liberators, in quotes. In addition, intercepted messages reportedly show that the Russian command has ordered its troops to reach the southern outskirts of the city by September 1st, meaning to engage in direct fighting for Pokrovsk by September 1st. Why am I showing this image, this photo? Because it is actually quite symptomatic. The Russians are starting to look for success or seek support from the local population, emphasizing that the loss of Pokrovsk is supposedly inevitable. But there are certain logical things here. If everything were going well for them, they wouldn't be searching for the positions of Ukrainian troops and simply wouldn't be handing out leaflets so blatantly. Moreover, it's worth noting that our counterintelligence is working very actively and effectively right in Pokrovsk. Just yesterday, they caught another one of those waiters who was giving away our positions, and the security service of Ukraine, the counterintelligence, detained him while he was fishing. But, well, the situation in Pokrovsk is really critically difficult for us, yet interestingly, the Russians still can't manage to push it through either. That's the thing. And that's why they turn to the locals. Right now, there aren't that many changes on the map of Pokrovsk regarding this, because at the moment we're seeing I would even say a certain informational silence continuing. Since last week, I mentioned that there are some decisions and changes here. What these changes and decisions are should not and cannot be discussed. But I'll say this, certain measures are being taken in an attempt to improve the situation. There's absolutely no guarantee that these attempts will be successful, but at least they're being made. So right now, there really is a certain informational silence. That is why, and precisely because of this, we aren't seeing any significant changes on the map. The situation is also troubling not only around Pokrovsk, but also to the north, with the movement toward Kostiantynivka, the enemy's advance in that direction. Because, let's put it this way, we have two important logistical hubs. The first is Dobropilya. It concerns Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad. The second important logistical hub is Drushkivka. It is directly related to two important settlements, Kostiantynivka and further on Toretsk. Accordingly, the Russians have they've already advanced toward Dobropilya. And this is essentially an indication that the Dobropilya direction will soon become relevant. But they haven't advanced toward Drushkivka yet. They do have prospects for this. They can move along the Kazeni Torets River here. They can also move in the same direction from the side of Poltavka and Popovye Yar toward Drushkivka. It is important for them to reach at least 20 kilometers in the direction of drone flights. So we can see that right now from Popovye Yar and Poltavka to Drushkivka, well, these 20 kilometers are being established, more or less. But for now, we can't say that Russian drone operators can freely enter the area around Poltavka and fly all the way to Drushkivka. Although, by the way, the main fighting is currently taking place just beyond Poltavka, because after that, there's nothing but open space. And here, there are very few places where Russian drone operators could establish themselves and build up their presence. That's why, potentially, they are counting on capturing Poltavka and Rusinyar, and from there, using drones to target Drushkivka. In fact, it's precisely for this section of the front that rather fierce fighting is currently taking place. Ukrainian units are not allowing the Russians to gain a foothold in Poltavka, but in reality we can say that the capture of this settlement is imminent, or that it may be completely wiped off the face of the earth. In addition, fighting is also taking place in the Toretsk, or unfortunately the Kostiantynivka direction in this area. Let's focus on it. This area is primarily characterized by the absence of a natural barrier known as the Klebenbeek Reservoir. Here it is. Accordingly, on the northern shore of the Kleban-Bik reservoir, there are heights, elevations that, well, we are definitely holding. But the Russians have already entered these heights, specifically from the east, from the west, from the area of Yablunivka and Alexander Kalinove. They are pressing in. They are putting pressure on the flanks from the area of Dakhne and Toretsk in the Shchebinivka area. And in fact, we are left here with just one single combined defensive stronghold in the form of Kleban-Bik and Katerinivka, and a tiny strip in the form of a road that leads from these areas essentially to Klishchivka, Ivanopilia, and further on to Kostiantynivka. And as we can see, the Russians are also threatening this important defensive position. These are, in fact, the two most important strong points as of today. The Russians are putting pressure on them. In particular, Kleban-Bik and Katerinivka are being bombarded with an enormous amount. Just look at this road. You can see it on the deep state map. It's visible here. It leads to Klishchivka, and you can see how close the enemy is getting to it. And sorry for the tautology, has gotten closer. Kleban-Bik. The Russians are bombarding frontline units with Molniya 2 drones, actively looking for weak spots here. Little by little, they are narrowing this pocket that we have here. And this pocket soon won't be able to last forever either. It won't be able to last long. Little by little, our troops will be retreating in this direction, all the way to the highway. Well, before Kostiantynivka, let's say, the withdrawal will take place on the heights. But the main task is to ensure that it is not some kind of cascading retreat, but rather a relatively controlled one, as much as can be imagined in our current frontline realities. The situation has significantly worsened, and today I want to focus on it in more detail. The situation has significantly worsened to the north in the Lyman area. In Lyman, on the Lyman axis, we actually have three main points to pay attention to. Lyman, the Serebryansky forestry, and Siversk. Accordingly, the situation is becoming extremely complicated in all of these areas. They are interconnected, and a change in the situation at one of them leads to a deterioration in another direction. Let's take a closer look at this area, specifically the settlement area of Lyman. So what are its particular features? This is Lyman. Its particular feature is that here we have positions in the area, well, truly legendary positions, in the area of the Serebryansky forestry, a wonderful forestry that before the war truly flourished with greenery, but now it's just a devastated area, along with a huge number of Russians and their equipment to the south of Dibrova and Kremina. Recently, we can see on the deep state map that there have been advances in this area, both near Torske and in the area of the Serebryansky forestry itself. At one time, by the way, here in the Serebryansky forestry, successful counteroffensive actions were carried out by the armed forces of Ukraine back in May of last year, as well as by the first prototypes, so to speak, of the Consolidated National Guard Corps and several units at once. Both Azov and Burovy were involved here. They managed to push the enemy out of their positions in the Serebryanska forest. But that's history now. So once again, I want to draw your attention, dear friends, to the Lyman area and the Serebryansky forestry. So what exactly has been happening here lately? We even need to move the map like this so that it's easier to see. Lyman, Serebryansky forestry. When our troops drove the Russians out of the Kharkiv region and from the north of Donetsk region, the defense was actually built along the river, along the Zerebets River. This river passes through Nevske, Ivanivka, Terny, Torske, and flows into the Siversky Donets River. The Siversky Donets flows right here. Siversky Donets, this is all the Siversky Donets. At one time, well, this is the Siversky Donets. This is actually a real watershed line. You can see that south of the Siversky Donets, that is here, there were no Russian troops even from the beginning of 2022, while to the north in the area of Lyman, the Russians were capturing territories north of the Siversky Donets. But in 2022, they were unable to cross it. At one time, they lost a huge amount of equipment in Bilohorivka while trying to cross the rivers. They were unable to take Sviatohirsk in this direction because, in fact, we held positions on the southern bank of the Siversky Donets on the heights, and this allowed us to hold back the enemy. In short, there have been extremely desperate battles here since 2022, but in fact, the Russians did not advance south of this river because it is full flowing. The Siversky Donets is actually one of the 4 largest rivers in Ukraine. There is also the Nitrius River here. It is much smaller. Here it flows up to Kapivka, that's where it goes. And what has happened over the last, well, less than a year, let's say about 8 months, probably over the last 8 months, At first, the Russians pushed us out of the area from the areas that we had previously, a long time ago, let's say, controlled. They pushed us back to Nevsky, to Ivanivka, to Ternivka. Then they crossed to the other bank of the Zherebets River. And here they have now advanced all the way to Karpivka. Karpivka, together with Shandriholov and Novoselivka, forms a kind of cascade of reservoirs right here from the shallow, low-water Nitrous River, but with the expansion in the form of reservoirs, they create them. Accordingly, the Russians understand perfectly well that in order to block Lyman, just like with any other settlement, they need to cut off its logistics. So you see, I've now expanded the map to full screen so that you can all see what I was talking about. And it's necessary to, let's say, cut off the logistics of the city of Lyman. As far as I know, since 2022, there have simply been no crossings over the Siversky Donets River, unless perhaps we've set some up somewhere recently while controlling this territory. But overall, there aren't really that many crossings here. There is basically one significant and important road that runs from Lyman, passing through Drobyshev and Shandriholov, and then continues on to Borova. This is the logistics route, and it's exactly here that the Russians are advancing, and this is the route they want to cut off. Accordingly, they are creating an extremely threatening situation for Lyman as of today. This threatening situation began to take shape in the fall of last year. Now it is only getting worse and more complicated. And taking into account these Russian advances in Torske, essentially with the complete expulsion of our troops from the left bank of the Zherebets River, and the Russian advance in the area of the Serebryansk forestry. This not only creates further threats for Lyman, but it also poses additional threats of encirclement over Siversk and worsens the overall situation here on the Lyman front. This is what we are observing. In order to do something here, let's put it this way. The Russians need to be pushed back, which, for obvious and fairly classic reasons, we understand. We do not have enough manpower, and all these advances by the enemy here actually create potentially quite serious future threats for us in the Lyman direction, for the city of Lyman itself. This needs to be understood. And so in the context of infantry today, I would like to publicly start a small discussion, which I invite you friends to join in the comments to this video. This discussion will concern the fact that actually the day before yesterday, the president made a very interesting announcement, a statement. He said supposedly that the 18-24 contract program needs to be expanded. Expand how? He says by increasing the age. Well, if we increase the age from 18 to 24, then we're already entering the field of those who fall under mandatory mobilization. After all, in Ukraine, general mobilization starts at the age of 25. So what does the president mean by this? He is proposing, well, I know a little about this because I've talked to people involved in these processes. Right now, various methods and approaches are being actively developed to determine what types of fixed-term contracts can be offered to newly mobilized soldiers and what contracts can be proposed to those servicemen who are already serving, whether they are contract soldiers or have been mobilized in 2022, 2023, or 2024, to define the terms of their service. So right now, there is this movement, this search for possible options underway. And this is exactly where the president's announcement becomes the most interesting. I would be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments about, for example, let's put it bluntly, right now we have two alternatives, two possible paths. There is the path of mobilization. This is quite a forceful option, what people commonly refer to as bussification. Even though it shouldn't really be called that, nevertheless, it is what it is. Let's not fool ourselves. And there is another option. This is the voluntary recruitment option, where a person chooses to join the military voluntarily, selecting a specific position or vacancy within the defense forces, and then, as the president mentions here, they may receive certain privileges for signing such a contract. In other words, the terms of the contract, let's say 18 to 24 months, can be extended specifically to those who join voluntarily. It would be interesting to hear your thoughts in the comments to this video. What possible options are there in today's reality for attracting volunteers to the military in this way? On what terms? What kind of payments, for example? What structure could such a contract have, considering that right now within our defense forces, there are people who have already served from start to finish for 3.5 years during the full-scale invasion, have completed their service, including on combat positions, and have fulfilled their duty. So I encourage you to join the discussion in the comments. Please write your thoughts there. Well, to wrap up today's review, I'll do a quick overview of the situation in the south because there was some panic in the south regarding the southern district and the city of Korobeliv. That's what we call Mykolaiv, okay, the Korabelny district of Kherson. Right here where the Russians were shelling the bridge, aiming to destroy it. Yesterday, there were more attempts just like that. The Russians launched 7 KABs at the bridge, but failed to destroy it. Yesterday, there was a surge of media activity from, for example, Mykolaiv Izvanka and the head of the Kherson Regional Military Administration, Putin, claiming that supposedly our air defense forces in Kherson region shot down an enemy aircraft, specifically a KAB carrier. But unfortunately, these claims were not confirmed in the end. Pardon the tautology. However, the good news is that the bridge is still, relatively intact and passable from the southern district. But overall, the situation is, of course, moving toward a humanitarian crisis in this direction. That's why now, obviously, our air defense is working more actively, and they are targeting drone operators more intensively. Those operators who are sitting on the other occupied side of Kherson region, particularly in Oleshky. Here, I'm showing you a shot of our aviation striking the positions of enemy drone operators. This is in the area of Oleshky precisely. It was truly a devastating strike on a group of Russian drone operators who had been terrorizing the civilian population of the Kherson region from this very apartment building in Oleshky, targeting the nearest neighborhood in the southern district of Kherson, the Korabelny district, or as it's commonly called, the Ostriv district. Accordingly, such strikes are taking place. Yesterday, there was also information circulating on social media that in these same districts, a rather large and significant enemy ammunition depot was hit. Therefore, certain preventive measures are being taken and carried out in the Kherson region, but let's say these actions have mixed results. Well, it would have been a great victory, of course, if they had also shot down a plane, but unfortunately that was not confirmed yesterday. So now, the situation is unpleasant in terms of the humanitarian crisis that the Russians are trying to create in the Korabelny district of Kherson, but for now it is not catastrophic. The overall situation at the front is about the same. Everywhere it's critical, but not catastrophic. That's how things stand. Thank you, friends, for your attention. Take care. All the best until we meet again.